All right. I'm Paradigm Thinker, and just wanted to give you a little bit of information about myself and then get into the roots of what I'm trying to do. All right. I started this organization, Paradigm Thinking, because I feel like there is a problem that lies at the root of our communities, and people don't understand what it is. People think that we're angry because we're pulling the race card, or people think that we're angry because we can't get jobs. I mean, yeah, that's a portion of it, but that's not the underlying issue. So, um, what I would like to do with my movement would be to create individuals of African American descent who are able to critically and analytically think. And once you start to be able to think, people aren't as easily able to deceive you. And I think that because we have all grown up in a system where we've only been taught to take tests, especially now, I guess I'll tell my age a little bit. When I was in grade school, we were taking the TAS test, the Texas Assessment of Academic Skills. That has turned into the TAKS test, TAKS, Texas Assessment of Knowledge and Skills, and has now been called the STAR test. I don't even know what that acronym stands for, but nonetheless, these children are taught how to take a test. You're not even learning how to you're not even learning how to think. You're being told or taught what to think and how to pass the test. And that's a problem because when you start to allow a school system that was not designed for them to succeed, you're allowing your children to be indoctrinated into a society and into a system, and that system is racism, white supremacy. And we cannot allow that to continue to happen because if we don't teach our children their history, their culture, and kind of align that with everything else, then our history and our culture is lost. Um, Part of the reason why the African proverbs and why African culture in general has been able to last this long, or was lasting as long as it was for the Europeans took over, was because in African communities they were so tight knit. They spread this knowledge on a continual basis. You didn't send your son or your daughter to learn how to hunt or make pottery or fish with another tribe. You taught your children the customs and traditions of your tribe because that is what was important. That was a system of values and beliefs that you needed your children to know and to carry on. That was a legacy of tradition. So, with that in mind, I would like to introduce a few texts that I think that would kind of get the wheels going for us in our community to know a little bit about ourselves and be able to understand the different systems that are set up that were set up in an effort to oppress us then, and they continue to oppress us now. And when you can readily identify those systems, you don't fall into the traps so easily. And at that point, when you're able to recognize and respond and be proactive as opposed to being reactive, you have now created a paradigm shift in your thinking, coining the term or the phrase being a paradigm thinker. So, the first text is From Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolph Windsor. This book is amazing. If you're wanting to know about your culture and your history and your heritage, and you think that, the world is against you, even if you're a faith based person, if you have a spiritual belief and a spiritual grounding in a religion, this book is based off of the Bible. And I encourage you to use your Bible as a history book because a lot of what is in this book is all of the book is based off the Bible. Okay, great book, and it teaches us that everyone everyone was born of African descent, and it wasn't until events later that we now have different cultures and different ethnicities and races of people. But at the very beginning, the cradle of our civilization was in Africa, and everybody was African American, was African. We're all black. Ugh. Waiting for some comments about that, but yeah, there you go. All right. So after you read that and you understand the fall of our civilization. Then my screen just went blank, I'm sorry. After you read that and you understand the fall of our civilization because it goes into slavery and things like that, I encourage you to read the Willie Lynch letter. Yeah, because not to, I guess, dampen the mood after you read about the power that we once possessed and that we still have. You need to read the Willie Lynch letter because that letter outlines how a particular group of people, European Americans, oppressed African Americans from slavery and even until present day. The book talks about how you turn the young against the old, the lights against the dark. Does that sound familiar? Take away the men from the women, separate the women from their children. And if you think about that and then put it into 2015, the mass incarceration of African Americans, these men weren't just, I mean, yeah, they weren't just criminals, that's what we're going to call them, that's what the justice system calls them, criminals, but they were husbands, they were fathers, they were, uncles, they were grandfathers, they were men, you know what I mean? And the government is continuing to incarcerate our black men, and the numbers are off the charts. So again, you're separating the men from the women, and then women are now forced to have to raise their children, on their own. And we kind of breed our daughters to feel like, well, you don't need a man because a man's gonna leave you. And that's the same thing that happened during slavery, except they weren't being incarcerated; they were being lynched, murdered, killed. So it's the same thing. The symptoms are the same. Where its history has continued to and will continue to repeat itself until we learn. Willie Lynch letter. Read that because those problems and that syndrome is still present in 2015. After you read the Willie Lynch letter, some people argue that Willie Lynch wasn't a real person, and that's just something to kind of keep up the whole race baiting and whatever. Fine, cool. But then after you read that, check out A Narrative in the Life of Frederick Douglass. I bought this book for $1 in half price book. I bought it for $1. And it's a 68-page read. You can read it in a day. But Frederick Douglass, this is his narrative that he wrote. He outlines the exact same tools of oppression that were used during slaves on his plantation. He outlines these tools that Willie Lynch outlined of how to oppress African Americans. And this book, if you're wondering if Willie Lynch was real or if the letter was written by somebody to kind of kick up dirt between the races, read this because it's in here. It's in here. That's that. And after you read that, pick up, you can go online to Google, and I want you to Google Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Exposition speech, because Booker T. Washington was born a slave in the South, so his view on things was a little bit different, after slavery was after the enslaved African Americans were emancipated. His view after having this newfound freedom was quite different than that of W.E.B. Du Bois. So I encourage you to read Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Exposition speech, because Booker T. Washington tells us we need to take the tools that we learned during slavery, which were farming, blacksmithing, different things like that. Let's do that, because in essence, in doing that, that's how African Americans can get back to having Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was burned down June 6th of 1921, but we'll get into that in another video clip. So the books, if you have those, are kind of going in chronological order. You've got the beginning of our race. You've got how to enslave African Americans. You got a narrative about a former slave. Now you have a speech written by a former slave who is trying to present a way to come together and maintain our communities and maintain that close knit sense of African American tradition that we once had. All right, so that's also free. You can Google that online. My screen just went blank. Okay, here you are. You can Google that online and you can download the PDF for free. After you read that, I want you to pick up a copy. You can also get this online for free. W.E.B. Du Bois, Souls of Black Folk. I paid half of this price. Paid half of that at half price books. Probably paid like $2 for this. You can get it. If you just want the book to have in your library, kind of share it, pass it around. There you go. You can always download it online for free as well. And I also have this copy of it. It's the same copy, just kind of a bit more colorful, and it's the same price. And I'll probably after tax pay about $1.15 for it after taxes at Barnes and Noble. But yeah, Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois, and there you go. And what W.E.B. Du Bois presents in this text is the theory of double consciousness. And that's very important because as African Americans, we have to know how to live in America being both African American and being both American. And we also have to do what European Americans don't have to do, which is live behind a veil of consciousness, meaning we can't be ourselves. We have to always be a second self in front of this group of people. So on that note, even if you don't want to read the whole book, that's fine. But I encourage you to read at least chapters 1 through 3, because chapter 3 is Du Bois' answer to Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Exposition speech. I'm not going to spoil it. I want you to read it. But read those 3 chapters, and you'll see that W.E.B. Du Bois is giving an answer to Booker T. Washington, and you'll kind of see the correlation between those 4 texts and the Willie Lynch letter and the Atlanta Exposition speech. Excuse me. So when you're done reading that last book, as an introduction for everyone, I'm not going to overload you right now, I want you to pick up a copy of The Miseducation of the Negro. This is also available online for download. I don't know if it's for free, but I know a friend of mine downloaded her copy on her Kindle for free. And if you got an iPhone, you can download the Kindle app for iPhone for free, and that gives you access to some of this stuff for free. So sometimes knowledge and education is free. You gotta know where to get it. But this basically just tells us that Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois were on the right track, but Woodson kind of poses a new theory, and he kind of says, yeah, it's okay to go to a predominantly white institution and get their education, and it's also okay to go to a historically black institution and get education. But it's what you do with that education, that when you put it back into your community, that's what makes the difference. Because some argue that going to Harvard has more weight than going to Howard. And that very well might be true. I'm an HBCU alumni myself, but I do know it's what you do, because you can get a Howard education or a Morgan State education, or, you can get a Harvard education or a Yale education. And as an African American, you can decide to not bring that knowledge and education back to your own community, and you've done nothing. So it's what you do with it. Are you bringing that brain back to your community to make it better? That's the difference. So Carter G. Woodson kind of talks about that in this book, Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. And there's a quote on the back that he wrote. And it says, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary. So I'm going to need you guys to think about that, replay it, think about it, whatever. But another blurb on the back, in case you're wanting a little bit more information, says that Carter G. Woodson's book is that African Americans of his day were being culturally indoctrinated rather than taught in American schools. This conditioning, he claims, causes African Americans to become dependent and to seek out inferior places in the greater society of which they are a part. He challenges his readers to become autodidactics and to do for themselves, regardless of what they were taught. If you don't read anything else ever again in life, read this. So read this. So again, you've got Book Check, Babylon in Timbuktu by Rudolph R. Windsor. Got the Willie Lynch Letter. You can download that off the internet for free. Then I want you to read Narrative of Frederick Douglass. You can also get this for free online. Boom. Then I want you to read Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. I believe you can get that online for free. I'm not sure, but you can pick up a super cheap copy for a couple of bucks on a local half-price books or even Amazon. You can find it used. Then I want you to read the Atlanta Exposition Speech by Booker T. Washington. That is definitely online for free. And I want you to read Carter G. Woodson's Miseducation of the Negro. If you have any comments, any questions, you want to ask me something, I've got a whole plethora of books back here that are African American. I've got a lot of theory texts, France Fanon. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But if you want more books, if you are, already into this, you already know a lot about it, then, great. But if you're just getting into it, I encourage you to read these first and let me know what you think. You can always ask me questions. I'm paradigmthinkinginc at gmail.com. That's paradigmthinkinginc, INC, at gmail.com. Email me, follow my blog, gparisjohnson.wordpress.com. Let me know what you think. All right.